Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we'll bring you day 383 of Russian invasion into Ukraine. As always, with Olexiy Arestovych, former advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel, and Mark Feygin, Russian opposition politician. Also, today's thanks go to our members John F. Seth, Carolyn G., and Olga Lewis for continuous patronage of our channel. Thank you guys for support. Dear friends, glad to see you all on Feygin Live. It is Monday, March 13th. Time is 9 p.m. in Kiev, 10 p.m. in Moscow, and we're doing our usual stream with Olexiy Arestovych. Glad to see you, Olexiy. Good evening, everyone. Please do not forget to click the button like. Right, day 383. Olexiy knows what he's talking about. I'm just joining here as the 25th frame myself to always remind you to subscribe if you have not done that yet. This is very important. You can find Alexei's link down below under the video. And Feygin Live link is down there too. If you are watching that in English, do not forget to subscribe to Privateer Station. Many people are watching without that, and it is important for us to grow a bit. And of course, post links to our stream in your social media and different boards where you discuss events. Make sure those people who need to see that, they do get a chance. All right, let's start discussion. And you think we can start with the map today, Olexiy? Sure, Mark, but there are no major surprises there. All right. The longer we look at it, well, I guess we're zombifying the map, or... Right. Well, Bakhmut indeed is not going to be surrendered. At least right now, this is not on the plate, and there are many people trying to prevent its capture. We see that it is semi-encircled. Eastern side is occupied. We can see, according to this map, probably Wagner is the most active part of opposing troops fighting here. And we understand that, of course, when you are there on your front, on your part of that front, you may see different than what we see here on the map. It's more intense, obviously. And even here we can see that two major roads to Slavyansk and Konstantinovka, they are either under fire control or have been cut by the enemy. Regardless, if we're still fighting in Bakhmut, it means that we found solutions to continue providing supplies, ammo, and rotating our troops. So far, our military command has made a decision to not give up Bakhmut, so we continue fighting there. You can also see a weird arrow pointing to the right here a little bit, because that's an unusual direction. They're trying to attack Razdolovka, but good luck, we have a very good defense line there that basically kicks ass of anyone who tries to attack that. In the area of Liman, they also are trying to push, but if you compare this map with the earlier version, the arrows are still in the same place, they're not moving anywhere. It's local tactical skirmishes, and it's a very heavily forested area, so we're holding our positions. They're trying to sneak by, but it doesn't quite work. They also tried to exert some pressure on Kupiansk direction, Dorechnya, Lzhanka, and it didn't quite work. So their command is trying to figure out other options, what can they do there, and they're calling it a magic word, regrouping. So anywhere we find that magic word, it means that they are suffering and they don't know how to counter that. They also keep attacks on Avdiivka. They actually hit a school in that village. One person dead, two wounded. And they found a solution for their front that they keep trying to do is conduct offensive both on the front and on the flanks. So they're trying to sneak by around the flanks. Because usually if we are in danger of losing our troops, getting in a kettle, we withdraw, and they're trying to mimic that from their earlier successes where they had some use of that strategy. Similar story in Marinka, on the same direction, Marinka and Pobeda and Georgievka, but our forces are static, holding their positions and grinding down the enemy troops. On Vugledar, some sources came out and said that the enemy is preparing a second attempt to attack us after the first complete destruction and defeat. They are preparing another attempt in that direction, and they haven't changed their order. And Russian commanders, we know only one way to complete their orders. They just keep using blunt force to try to push through. In Zaporozhye, it's relatively, I cannot even call it quietude, but there are tactical battles of local value without attempts to change the front line. In Kherson, there are some events happening. Partisans blew up the railroad that they need to continue supporting their troops. On the whole south, there's generally a rotation happening with some refitting of the troops. And on the east too, but it is somewhat limited. Basically, battalion withdrew, battalion entered, so it's not a global increase. And what Russian army is doing from the military standpoint can't even be called proper offensive. It's just frontal assaults with an attempt to push. And they continue, and they hit and hit and hit. Good luck. All right, that's it. We have 155,000 already watching us. Over 50,000 of you clicked the like button. Please do not forget to do that. And of course, our viewers are awesome. Sometimes we exceed even 300,000 plus viewers. And thank you guys for supporting us. It does lay on your shoulders. If me and Olexiy will continue, I'll be able to do these streams. So your presence, your likes, your shares, it does help us to continue grow and continue sending the message. Send it to your friends, to those who might need it, to those who are getting taken away by some propaganda instead. Okay, have you seen the meeting of Kadyrov and Putin? Did that produce any impression on you? Did they show Kadyrov on purpose after all the rumors about his bad health? Mark, as a generally modest person, I'm trying to diminish the influence of our shows, but I have full impression that after our show, somebody grabbed Kadyrov by the neck and dragged him into the chroma key, whatever that screen where they talked with Putin, and they picked the right angle to make sure his flabby physique will be a bit better picture on the screen to show that both leaders of Russia are doing okay. And unfortunately, Putin was still grabbing the table with all the might he has and basically showing that he has issues with either health or psychology. Yeah, some evil tongues are saying that he has problems with backbone or also hemorrhoids. Yeah, Alexei, we heard that 6 or 7 years ago he fell from the horse. So there was a trauma of the spinal cord and of the back, and it's not conducive to proper sitting at the table. So could be that. Right, Mark, but it's always a message. So this message was recorded to either control and throw your own agenda into the media, or to fight somebody else's agenda that was thrown into the media. So I guess their gauges really pegged, and they needed to create that picture to dispel some of the rumors floating in Russia. And two heads of regions were making smart faces, were moving some papers on the table, And I even saw, Alexei, that Kadyrov's text on the page was written in some really big font. So I suspect he's got issues with eyesight. So I think they just increased the font so he could read without using glasses or something. And they do that. We've seen that before, right, Mark? I think it was like font 24 or something like that. Yep. So do you think that matter appeared because indeed he has issues with health, but on the background of Prigozhin having other issues, not with his health yet, but other caliber? And there's also inner fighting with the apparatus. Zakharova, press secretary of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, came out in Russia and said we cannot make a Soviet information bureau like Stalin did. And everybody is talking about different events and slightly different agendas, so it's pluralism. And people estimated that statement to be to be trying to address the difference in commentary, even on the Russian front. Some people are cursing, and some people are very not satisfied with what's happening. But that's what internet is. If one looks at the Telegram channels, it's even more extreme. Mark, it's a difficult, complex event. I suspect that Zakharova read fresh social results of social research where half of Russians want to strike a peace deal immediately, 75% do not want to partake in any military events, and that may have been a reaction to that. And it doesn't seem that Putin really lost control of the media agenda. He's still containing that to a degree. It's just times are different from Stalin times. Now it's post-meta modern, whatever you call it. And imagine a Christmas tree where everybody's bringing a special toy to that tree and putting it where they want to see it fit. It's still somewhat orchestrated, so if somebody brings the wrong toy, they'll be attacked and withdrawn immediately. There was a recent event when one of their experts mentioned the last name of Navalny. He was immediately corrected, so you could see his gesture holding the earpiece and basically instructed to not ever bring that name up again on Russian media. But the bickering continues. Igor Girkin also attacked Prigozhin a bit. He basically said Prigozhin is a criminal, and criminals have a very dark end usually, so he's trying to stamp him. And yeah, Alexei, Wagner is still screaming. They are screaming that Prigozhin is crying wolf, saying that he's not getting enough money. And he outlined some crazy numbers that they need monthly. But I understand that since they're losing troops and they have lesser amount of people, Russian Ministry of Defense is basically pointing at that, saying, you don't need that much money, you have less troops now. Right, but let's continue the previous thought. Basically, Mark, that in Russia they create an illusion of civil society by having several different spectrum of Kremlin supporters. They have the ones who are ultra-patriotic, want to fight more and deeper and go further, and the others who want to sit down and just negotiate and to hold their lands, and somebody in the middle. But look at all of them. Remember who was sitting at the Putin's reception in Kremlin? They all were there, shoulder to shoulder. So how free they are. It is just an attempt to make a gesture in favor of diplomatic explanation that Russia still has some freedom of speech and not utterly totalitarian, just trying to mask the reality. But again, I wouldn't say that Kremlin lost media influence. They definitely have that under control. But speaking of Europe, Italian representative said that they actually are looking at migration threat, because Italy is one of the southern European countries that faces the waves of migrants from Africa. And they've always been, and they probably will continue being. They have a special European Union mission on seas, which is trying to turn around some boats or fish others out of the water. And Guido Corzetta said that we can surely say that the current wave of migration from Africa is generally a result of Wagner troops and their actions in some Central African countries. We know which countries they are. And according to his opinion, this is Russian strategy to influence situation in the countries that are supportive of Ukraine. And he called upon European Union to a better control of waves of migrants starting to come to their countries again. And in Italy, they usually select a speaker who will be making a statement, a Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Social Issues, but this time it was Minister of Defense who came out with this message. So they clearly outlined the reason for the new wave of migrants, and they linked it to Wagner activities in Africa. And one can recall the refugees from Syria, several millions of those who stormed Europe, which actually caused a crisis there, and they had to reevaluate their politics about migrants. Remember some countries being seriously against these waves, and some countries like Poland and Hungary saying we're not taking anyone. And that example of grain deal, which was almost extended, Russian Foreign Affairs said they're not objecting to that deal for 60 days for now, but it's still going on. And that was another attempt to starve Africa a bit and cause more migration to Europe to try to support Russian agenda in Ukraine. And I understand Wagner has a second front or second half of that task in Africa to continue pushing different military atrocities to cause more migrants to leave their lands, their countries, and to move up north to Europe. This is part of a hybrid strategy of attacking European Union. And not only, Minister of Defense of Moldova came out today, Guardian quoted them, and saying that Russia is conducting hybrid warfare against Moldova. There's no immediate military danger, but there are other dangers. It's a hybrid warfare that Russia is carrying out. And they're causing a certain stress and trying to destabilize Moldovan power, duly elected officials. It's a similar attempt that Italy is talking about, similar arsenal, different measures, and in a whole spectrum from Africa to Canada and from Moldova to Lisbon. We can also remember attempts to overthrow in Chernogorия and capturing some of the members of parliament, for which agents of Russian secret services were indicted. And I did read a lecture in Europe at some point on some NATO forum. I was making a statement there that they misunderstand how Russian hybrid warfare specialists see Europe. They see you as a big iceberg, which has some cracks. These cracks you are naming your own, because you criticize yourself much better than any Russian analyst can, because you guys have a fight of opinions and you're outlining the most problematic areas, international, regional, national levels. You highlight all that. And the moment there's a new crack highlighted that can be affected, Russian specialists in a hybrid warfare, they stick a chisel in there and start hammering it. Very respectable experts of highest level can say, were coming back at me and saying, I don't know, how can they support ultra-right and ultra-left parties? Yeah, that's funny, Olexiy. And this is illogical. They have very different agendas, they were telling me. I was telling them that, guys, it is Lenin's concept. He lived in Switzerland for a while, and he birthed a theory of fighting the bourgeoisie. And that theory, I'll tell you how it works. Any question needs to be immediately turned back at power. Doesn't matter if it's ecology, refugees, energy matters. What else? Reforms, pension reforms. Any question. You take any question, you start a protest, you support the protesters, and you try to address the full spectrum from those who can set a police vehicle ablaze on the street to official senators and representatives of some departments in the European countries which have different positions, for example, ultra-left, and it is pumped and pushed in that direction, and always brings up a question of representation and power. And they continue doing that. You kick them out of the door and they crawl through the window. But they're saying that they came back to me and said, well, okay, we understand ultra-left, but why would they pick the ultra-right? Sure, because ultra-right has a different agenda. They try to get rid of excessive migration, they're addressing the national security, they address other issues in France and Germany, and that story will continue being everywhere. But then the politicians are coming, and basically people in that Congress are telling me, well, that's low. Yeah, but it's their practice. And they basically try to attack you on both flanks. And they also create a strategic level media event out of their agenda. Remember, there was an event in Europe where some migrants were grabbing women in Germany. There was a train that came to Cologne from France, and they were paid migrants as a sort of flash mob and also some organized crime. And they were paid for a flash mob to grab females, everyone they could find on the train station. And they went pretty wild there. And I was watching that very attentively. I was curious about the messages that were thrown in the media sphere. And the message was that German men are important. And they're not even resisting when their women are being groped. So there were two waves of that. And they brought up some highlights, like a picture with a guy and supposedly his wife that being groped by a bunch of migrants, and he's telling her, hey, wait, I'm calling the police. And that was peddled around for a while in different social media. On the next stage, a story appears about some Slavic roots person of Slavic ethnicity. Oh, yeah, right, who kicked them out, something like that, who was a kickboxer, ex-champion, and a guard in some hotel. He let the women in, stood at the doors and said shoo to the migrants. And they supposedly asked him, are you a German man? And he said, no, I'm a Slavic person. And then they kind of got afraid, stopped, and decided to leave him. So he turned out to be some Ratko Mladic guy from Croatia, still, a Slavic ethnicity, and it's a comparison of old, impotent so-called Europe with new, stronger blood from the East. And he was even giving a few interviews to some media saying that, yeah, we actually know how to, we are stronger. And the refrain was to the Yugoslavian war, where there were a lot of rapes, and there was actually a consideration that this was a strategy to demoralize your opponent in that war, because PSYOPs professionals know that the narrative that you cannot defend your women is one of the strongest during any warfare. That really brings morale down. And that was used as a technology, as a conveyor in different prison camps on opposing sides. And that was, some people are saying it was a PSYOP manipulation, others saying that was not organized, but they still try to make a story. And then there was another story about some raped 13-year-old Russian who was in Europe, and even Lavrov, Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, picks it up. So here's the spectrum, from some chats, from social media discussions, all the way up to a Minister of Foreign Affairs. And Merkel was back in power, so after Lavrov's statements that our 13-year-old was raped in Germany, Merkel and her people came out and said, no, we cannot prove that. We cannot find that case. And Lavrov said, no, we don't trust your data, we know that it happened, and you guys are wrong. And that's Russian media machine. And they even involve President of Russian Federation rather often in their operations. And either he's starting something from the top, or he's reacting to other media sources that started or are being pushed from the bottom up. And Europeans refused to understand that for a long time. And the ones who were acknowledging it when you were drinking beers with them, off the record, they were saying through their teeth that we cannot talk and address that issue on the official level. We understand what Putin is doing. And that was, it was back then, right? 16, 17, 18, 19, 2020. That was the narrative in Europe. And this war finally is breaking that dam. Europe has really got a chip against Putin. And we thought initially we would be fighting this war just with Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Britain, and Poland on our side against Russia, but apparently Europe is waking up. Ukraine is a third importer in the world after Qatar and India. Stockholm Institute of Military Research published and said that 35% of our imports are brought by United States, Poland 17, and Germany 11. Even Britain is lagging by 1% at 10%. And Czech Republic is at 4.4%, or quietly supply us, but very thoroughly. And there is an opinion here in Ukraine that I'm fighting against the Germans are not the Germans they used to be. And I keep fighting that opinion because Germans are, look at that, they're third after United States and Poland. And this is a huge change in their stance. So one needs to take a hat off and bow rather deep in their direction. And another news that one of the officials of Bundeswehr, Gerhard Zorn, is going to be sent into early retirement due to his statements. It's a last year interview that came to light where he said that Ukraine is fending off Russian attacks but will never be able to win on the front and change it. And he'll be replaced by 59-year-old General Major Carsten Breuer. So Germans are attacking even the tongues that are bringing a wrong media into the limelight, a wrong agenda. And that is what the modern Germany is. And I'm very thankful to them for taking that hard stance against Putin. You know, I remember it's been a year almost since the streams when we had some fun wording. You basically told them, F you. No, Mark, you're talking too much about that. I was just holding a page like that. And, you know, some people read it differently. But yeah, indeed, the Germans made a huge pivot on their position and changed an opinion on Steinmeier and the motions in the parliament. These are fundamental things. We are very thankful to Germany, and I want to say danke, Germany, for your help to Ukraine. All right, what else did I want to mention? I wanted to say that in Ukraine, we have a record increase of budget for 537 billion hryvnias. It's 14 billions more than expected, and over 518 billions will be sent to the military sector to buy new equipment, armor, and make payments to the military servicemen. And this is about $11 billion, I guess. And 19 billion hryvnias will be sent to stabilize the economy. We understand that we do not have money, that level of money as a country ourselves, so it's a signal that we are getting this money from our allies with the guarantees of certain numbers to be spent for military. And that's not even a full budget, this is just topping it off, this additional influx. And this is a very good piece of news that is saying that long strategic stability is being provided to Ukraine for that whole budget year. We are carried by our allies, and that helps us to stay stable. That allows us to continue solving these pressing matters that we have, and kicks the stool from under those who are screaming that Ukraine is folding, is about to collapse, and continue to peddle Putin's side of propaganda. An interesting questionnaire was carried out in the Ukrainian population. About half of Ukrainians are saying that we want to continue fighting regardless, even if we lose support of the West. a quarter said that if we get back our eastern territories, we may stop from invading Crimea and maybe bring it up as a negotiation on the table. So overall, this is way over 68%, and this is a serious support to the intent and official position of president and higher Ukrainian leadership to continue fighting this war to our victory. Are we going to talk about China, US, and the... Yeah, let's talk about that, Olexiy. I'll bring up this topic. We have 260,000 with us, about 100,000 click the like button. So listen, we already addressed China. You are skeptical about Chinese involvement in helping Moscow, and perhaps they're taking more of a special role and creating vassal relations with Moscow and Russia, a dependent relation of Russia on China. And after that, he is also visiting or going to talk to Zelensky. And maybe that's on purpose. We don't know if that, in what format this conversation will happen. Perhaps Chinese are peddling this theme as well to bring it higher in the media. But it seems that visit will occur. It might get disrupted, but so far everything points that it's preparation for that visit, which is planned for 21st of March by Xi to Moscow, which is a very unusual step, but that's happening. And maybe as a result of this visit, there could be a virtual conversation with Zelensky afterwards. Do you think China may actually decide? Understandably, they'll suffer a lot of consequences if they decide to side with Russia somewhat on the international arena. Or do you think they are still holding the position that it is a game? Let's look wider, Mark. Let's look at something unusual. First is why Xi Jinping is coming to Moscow. Why not Putin going to China? Well, it was an official visit by Putin to Olympic Games last year, right? No, Mark. I think he's afraid to leave his bunker because while he's away, the country may play his funeral, and he needs to keep in control. So recently there was a visit by Iranian delegation to China, and then China came to Iran, right? And here it's a little different. Of course, Russia will play the card that we visited China last year, but we understand that they're just afraid. So what's the background for his visit? First, they renamed 8 Russian regions and cities on the east of Russia into Chinese names. And we remember that the century of losses, the 19th century in Chinese history, those losses were incurred through interaction with Russian Empire. It was Russian Empire that took the territories. And upon that map incident, Soviet Union would have brought 5 armies down there and created political pressure. But now it's the background that Moscow swallowed and is keeping mum about it. And another part of that story is that Saudi Arabia talking to Iran, and China is being thanked for that participation. These negotiations were happening since 2021 in Iraq. For the most part, it's due to Iraq's and Oman intermediary assistance, and the topics for discussion are wars in Yemen, from where Saudi Arabia wants to withdraw. They want some guarantees so that Hussites and Iran would not attack Saudi infrastructure, oil pumping and refineries. And Saudi Arabia was not too successful in Yemen. So among different questions being discussed is agreements about Iraq, I understand, and some normalization of relations. And symbolically, they reinstated their diplomatic relations. And frankly, for a while, their relations were as bad as Iran and Israel. And Sunni and Shia were resisting each other and were holding 3 regional wars at one time. So they've been really opposing. And at some point, Saudis even side with Israel against Iran. And all of a sudden, that negotiation is in the limelight, and China is being praised as intermediary, even though other countries were participating in that actively. But public relations is given to China. Where is that signal going to? That signal is going to United States. We can deal without you. We can solve our issues without you. It's in the bucket where United States are still indecisive about how much do they want to be present in the Middle East. Here's a message that we can figure it out ourselves. And now in this context, he's going to Moscow. And then there is another message saying that he comes back from Moscow and says that he's going to support Moscow. What happens to his status of a peacemaker after being a peacemaker between Saudi Arabia and Iran? Right. Okay, I came from far. Oh, that's a long thought, Olexiy. Yeah, I came from far, but they now have a prestige of a international peacekeeper, international problem solver, and I think the bigger picture will come through after his visit. I think Moscow visit will be a very symbolic one. They'll say something anti-West and ideological, but they'll also press Moscow with a task to close shop without waiting for a big Ukrainian counteroffensive that might put Moscow and China in a very difficult situation. China has no illusions about Moscow not being able to resist our big counteroffensive, which is likely to happen at the end of spring, and they want to preclude the possible defeat of Russians. They still need Russia as a scarecrow for the West. They don't want to get in a situation where they have an ally who was severely defeated on the front. Proper one, right, with disgrace, with column of captured fighters. In any case, I think that'll be an attempt to play peace before our counteroffensive, and I think this attempt will fail because we have a very stern ideation that we will continue our offensive, and we want to get our lands back militarily first before we discuss anything. But United States are also looking at that deal with a degree of attention. They need to react to Iran and Saudi peace deal. They need to react to Chinese statement involvement in that. And as we were talking, United States, actually, recently there was a blip on the news. It's international diplomacy, one needs to be careful here. So I'll quote, United States are calling upon Xi Jinping to contact Zelensky, so Beijing would listen to Ukrainian point of view on the situation in this war. And that's Wall Street Journal posted. Negotiations or a conversation between Xi Jinping with Zelensky will happen a week after his visit to Moscow. So he's playing kind of an Erdogan role here. Visit to Moscow, visit to Kiev, same pattern, visit to offenders, and then to us. We, I think, can predict what our president will say, something in lieu that as long as Russian troops are in our occupied territories, it means we cannot negotiate because these buchas are happening daily. We can talk about troop withdrawal, yes, but nothing else. And Moscow sent Peskov out, who said that, well, there is no reason to negotiate, and we are still capable to solve matters militarily. And that's a reaction of Moscow to China's pressure, which is being exerted, which I believe is basically a single point of agenda: take your troops and leave Ukraine. So we are understanding that, yes, we do want to have results of these conversations sooner, but we need to wait for another week and see what unfolds. We'll see, especially after his conversation with Zelensky, we'll see what Chinese line will be. And I suspect that Moscow will not like the Chinese position, and that nervous reaction of Putin's press secretary, Peskov, is probably a sign of that. We'll remind that to our viewers that China is supporting territorial integrity of Ukraine. So answering your question maybe a little too long and somewhat winded. I just wanted to show a big international architecture picture to see that to show that China is not really looking for continuing the conflict. They want to stay peacekeeper and get more ratings on the international authority in the world that you can use later. I'll add here to this analysis from my point. I also see Beijing's wish to prevent the crash of Putin's regime. Putin is leading basically a pro-Chinese party in Russia. But the story of dependent from China is definitely Putin's agenda right now. Now it's his saving grace, because China wants him as a ruler in Russia. With him, they can achieve anything they want in the conditions of international isolation and when the war ends. Because otherwise, without Chinese support, end of war will be the end of Putin. But in this case, supplies of any weapons to Russia will expedite the demise of both Putin and China as well, because China will get under sanctions severely, and the economy, I doubt, can handle too much of that. I think it's more of a blackmail element here, Olexiy. They made a statement saying that they want to expedite the problem of Taiwan and their integration, and they're saying that if United States are supplying weapons to Taiwan, and United States indeed are supplying weapons and all, according to other agreements they have with Taiwan. But China made a statement saying that since United States is doing that, we want or can supply arms to the party in the war in Ukraine. But yeah, they're trying to, I think, Mark, they're trying to bring this agenda, but this is just an attempt. It is very unequal exchange. Yeah, Alexei, it reminds me of an anecdote about the guy who put a big banana in his swimming trunks and walking around the beach, and somebody is laughing at him, but he's saying, well, you may be laughing, but I get 10 drinks a day on that. So we'll see, Mark. It's an interesting positional political discussion. West already indicated their stance that any attempt to supply military support to Russia will result in Ukraine getting even more equipment and armor to wage their defensive war. When this matter was brought up before, the Minister of Defense of the United States said we do want Ukraine to win, so we will continue supporting them. And Europe is also, and United Kingdom is also supportive. But note, India came out and shoved a knife in the back. No, not in the back, in the lower back, right? And they joined Europe in the price corridor for the oil price. So formally, Russia cannot supply oil to India if we play it by the book, because India joined the sanctions. And some evil tongues are saying that India is paying in rupees in their national currency, and Russia has several billion of those, and they have a huge problem to convert that, because there's very limited number of operations and mechanisms to convert that, and they're not getting dollars. So, even India made their mind in this regard. Let's see what China will play. But I'm thinking it won't even be Putin's conversation with Xi. I think the key element to that event will be conversation between Xi Jinping and Zelensky. That's where we'll know where things are going. All right, we've been live for about 43 minutes. We have 290,000 visiting us. Yeah, guys, do not forget to click the like button. People are asking. So, Kiev, Pechera, Lavra, Peskov addressed that too. Poor monks and etc. That religious establishment milestone in Kiev. What do you think if the story will have any continuation, any public element to that? Because Russia will be pumping that religious card as well. I don't know, Mark. Russia will be pumping, right, but they will not be successful. There is a decision by military leadership in Ukraine, military economic leadership, I should say, to put it delicately, they are addressing some forces that are engaged in pro-Russia campaign, and as they're saying, there are definitely some proofs that certain figures are supportive of Russian and Putin's invasion, but on the other hand, it's a very delicate balance because a lot of representatives of Orthodox Moscow branch of religion here, they took Ukrainian side early on in war. Many of the fighters on the front are of that denomination, and it is a very delicate matter to approach. And even Simonyan recently brought up that as well, said that since there was never much of a joint history between Georgia and Russia, and Georgia doesn't have a Kievo-Pechorsk Lavra there, so if need be, Russia can just nuke Tbilisi, and that's one of their leading speakers in the media. As for Ukraine, yeah, we do have that historic monument, and we do have a long history, and it'll take a very strong backbone for representatives of that denomination, or Orthodox denomination in Ukraine, to not rock the boat from inside and to rather take a position of the victim in this conflict than to rebel. This is not the time, and this is not the right action to do. Church is the institute that exists on a different time plane, and for them a year or 5, it's not big of a deal. And I think that they can be wise in this regard, and the decision of authorities needs to be respected, and they need to find a way to solve these matters in a civilized manner. According to the government laws, to our state laws, to as well church canonic laws and traditions, and this might have a path forward to keep it less painful. And if I was a leader, I would of that church, I would leave the confrontational rhetoric that will not give up and will continue being a sore. I think a smart way would be to continue finding for a solution. All right, I get it. A couple more topics that we can discuss. We have a little bit of time. You have it, right? Yeah, I do. All right. Oscar. Navalny, the movie Navalny got that. This is a big event. However, it is being played in the media. It is huge and important because that Hollywood story definitely is politicized. We know that Hollywood is definitely politicizing different events, and they're supportive of their point of view. They're very somewhat to the left. They're also pro different rights activists and defense, and there's going a big discussion on that matter regardless. For example, in Ukraine, let's call it Ukraine's upset about, oh yeah, there is some upset motives coming through the media and through the chats. Why did Navalny get the first prize and not the movie about Ukrainian kids being kidnapped? And it's a so-called Russian movie or about Russia and not about Ukrainian children. Well, the movie is not Russian, though. It is about Russia and Navalny, but it was shot by American and British filmmakers. Right, it's an international team. And they actually were awarding a movie on the subject of Navalny and that conflict, but it was shot by their own people. So that discussion about Navalny is up, and discussion about why his wife didn't mention Ukraine and war in Ukraine. I have my opinion, which I already voiced, but I'm curious to see what do you think about that in this regard. I would be more calm about her not bringing it up, because when the husband is in prison, the wife will be thinking about her husband. She is not authorized to make political statements, and His state of health is frail, so nobody knows how long does he have to live, and it's a very difficult situation. So I don't think it's the matter of wife to decide and put his life, the life of her husband, in some comparison with the war. Second, the organizers did not mention Ukraine, and they refused Zelensky to be present, and the precipice was kind of weird. Yeah, but one needs to understand what Hollywood is. It's a very lefty story. So many of them are atheists, which is already a position in the United States, with 80% having some religious belief. Hollywood is mostly atheists and materialists. I was talking to some Americans today, and they're somewhat on the left spectrum of political forces, and for them it's mostly important that rights and freedoms aspect than some others. So it's their choice. And what's resonating with them usually is people who threw a gauntlet to the authoritarian regime and took a stance against that. And that movie was actually started to be shot even before the first phase of the active war in Ukraine. So I suspect next year we may see movies about this war, where that same Hollywood will bring up to the forefront about the destinies of children and people who suffered. It doesn't mean this current war doesn't mean that others movies will not get that. And there are several of them in the making, and I know because I was interviewed in several of them. Netflix and BBC and the others are filming. I'm kind of tired of counting them. But that'll be available for the next year's Oscar. They're of a documentary, and fiction mix. So for us, it's an upsetting thing. Yes, at least they should have mentioned Ukraine. I didn't watch it myself, Olexiy, but people are writing in chat that the filmmaker mentioned Ukraine. I think, yeah, I was thinking that in one way or another, Ukraine will be mentioned, especially after the mass outburst. But the world is not Ukraine-centric. We need to understand that all these people in Hollywood, they definitely feel for us. But the ceremony of Oscar is such a competitive thing, such a competitive fight that is going on certain rules, spoken and not spoken of, and the fight of opinions and different groups. Every separate word, every look matters a lot. So it's a more complex event. There are also elections in the United States. The threat of maybe potential Trump re-election that Hollywood, to say the least, doesn't favor. And they're making decisions, also fighting for sympathies of their own compatriots, their own citizens, especially including the ones who are indecisive about helping Ukraine and probably preserving some balance with Russia. But in essence, nothing major happened. They are supporting liberal values, and they are awarding a movie that is fighting the totalitarian regime and whose family is suffering, and here's his family and children. And the help to Ukraine is huge. A lot of actors do support Ukraine. Many of them visited our country. And of course, the system of connections and current internet abilities allow us to plug in a lot of those ambassadors into our media. Sean Penn, Angelina Jolie, they are very vocal. They visited us. And the first press conference happened on the 24th of February, when the war started. I'm a big fan of Friends, and he was there. He was one of the very close to that movie. So I wanted to cheer my wife on the day, and I said, hey, remember that series? It was early beginning of war. Everybody was shocked. I was saying, hey, here's one of the actors standing next to me. But anyway, this is just a one-time event that doesn't conclude the whole agenda. I think Ukraine is fully supported. It just the United States were deciding or solving a difficult agenda. First of all, they had their own political agenda. They needed to support administration of, let's call it, another Russia, a different Russia that is resisting Putin. For them, it is very important. They want to give it a chance. Ideological media. And a third is that we need to understand that they're sending a strong message to politicians of the world, all the opinion makers, that they want to get rid of Putin's regime and they want to support the future Russia without that. And they differentiate between Putin and Russia. I differentiate between Putin and Russia. Oh yeah, you're getting for that a lot from your Ukrainian citizens. Right. I would make a couple, additionally to that, to balance it, I would make a couple gestures to Ukraine. That would be smart to balance it out, perhaps to nod in direction of Ukrainian movie making industry. And I understand why they did not let Zelensky in, because the speech of Zelensky would probably have taken over the narrative they were playing. It's not against him, it's just not to bring other side of that conversation, because he would be talking about fighting against Putin's regime, and then the movie about Navalny is somewhat breaking the message. They're slightly different in their address, and I'm not apologizing for Hollywood. I'm just addressing our citizens, saying there's nothing dangerous about that. And the editor of the movie, the author of the movie, came out and actually mentioned Ukraine because he understood the delicacy of the situation. And Roman Pope, on that background, came out also and supported the negotiations, and he is too appeasing in the Ukrainian mind as well, so that's another sore on Ukrainian consciousness. One needs to understand, though, that Hollywood and Pope, they have a global agenda. They appreciate Ukraine, but they have to address a global agenda, and one needs to understand why they're making these statements. It is not the process directed against us. It is not situation of Navalny instead of Ukraine. All right. We have about 330,000 watching us. It's the last topic for today. I want to bring another piece of news. There was a statement by Prime Minister of Georgia, Irakli Gribashvili, and he said that, right, Klitschko and Feygin came out, and other Ukrainian politicians, Arahami and others, and the dirty losers. Right, Mark, dirty loser is me, I think, in this picture. Exactly. Dirty in some sense, right? Let's not play that. So he thinks we're invading into inner affairs of Georgia. But the problem is that Polish doctors came to Georgia, and I was surprised that they were not let to see Sakashvili. And I would remind that Prime Minister Morawiecki basically came out and said that no, they're not letting them in. And that was such a chastising that don't even hope to take him out. Don't think that the consequences of your protest and the fact that the law was pushed back about foreign agents, that it will change anything or create a chance for you to let Sakashvili out. It's not even the main agenda on the Georgian officials' list, and there will not be extraordinary elections, and this was a sign in that direction. And basically a statement that he made was rather stern. So personally, and I guess you and me don't care about his words, but the question about perspectives remains, and the destiny of Mikhail Saakashvili. Today in Sky News, there was a piece of information from the attorney of Mikhail that his physical condition is very bad, that he has bones with he has issues with bones, and his weight is only 120 pounds. With his height, if it goes down, it may cause a lot of issues with inner organs and may cause collapse of some. So I recently had a stream with his relatives and representatives of his party, a very emotional one about his destiny. How do you see where the story goes now? According to the law of foreign agents, this was just an attempt to bring Russian laws into Georgia, and I understand that they also that was pushed back. But Saakashvili's question was a big second question on the agenda, and they, in my opinion, decided to go forth with it and continue not releasing him. And I am very curious to predict. I'm actually looking to predict that if they let him die in prison, the consequences for Georgia will be unwashable. The reaction of the world that will be shocked and surprised by their murder with a continuous torture of a person in prison in the 21st century, I think that'll be a strong reaction. And I cannot judge. It's hard to predict what these protests will come to. The West already made a statement. The West warned them publicly, right? They did. But one should remind them that you can cancel the law, you can withdraw the law about foreign agents, but you cannot unkill the person that you killed in prison. And speaking of Georgia losers, will be a very different situation. They will not be able to wash themselves off. And yeah, I guess, Olexiy, they'll be washed in different places, in other places by other authorities. Anyway, we've been trying to tell them, don't make idiotic steps. You have a great opportunity to do it now, to stop it. Even Russia got excited, given that Simonyan said that they can shoot missiles at Georgia. But a lot of Russian propagandists are giving kudos to Georgian leadership for being able to hold under pressure of public protests, and they're singing asanas to Georgian leadership that is supposedly holding against the West and the pressure of Western money and Soros, I guess, or whoever else USAID. That Georgia needs to stay strong and keep the course. Understand that, of course, their course means in direction of Russia. So it doesn't seem the Georgian government carried out any lessons out of this situation. They're dumb, Mark. If that death happens, they will automatically be qualified as totalitarian regime. Oh yeah, they'll get the whole pushback. You know, Poland doesn't like to keep quiet about that. Baltic countries will never be quiet. They'll give a very hard marks to these actions and these events, and I'm not even going to judge what Georgian people will do. But the international reaction can be prognosed here, and it'll be very rough and very personalized. And I think the whole country will suffer as well. There'll be no talk about European Union or NATO in any near future. All programs will be shut down, personal sanctions will be applied, and I suspect that's what Georgia leadership wants. But that's a word for Georgian people now. It's there, Mike. All right, 1 hour and 2 minutes. We've been 300,000 plus. 130,000 click the like button. Do not forget to share the links to that stream on your social media. Click the like button. That definitely helps us to get recommended and get new eyeballs on these conversations. And of course, please subscribe to Feygin Live. This is very important for us, so that those who watch us without subscription do that if they can. And of course to Olexiy Arestovych and to the privateer station if you are listening or watching that in English. Click the bell, don't forget that, and see you on Wednesday, right? Wednesday, 9 p.m. Kiev, will be Thursday morning Eastern for the English translation. I look forward to seeing you then. Goodbye. Mark, Kostya, dear viewers, see you on Wednesday.